Every city built before 1900 has them. Clock towers rising above everything else, visible for miles, impossibly precise for their era. They kept time across entire regions before radio, before electricity, before any technology we're told could synchronize clocks over distance. And then around 1900, something changed. Not gradually, all at once. The towers stayed, but what they were doing stopped. I've spent 4 months trying to understand what happened, and the deeper I look, the more I realize these weren't just clocks. They were something else entirely. Start with the obvious question nobody asks. How did a clock tower in Philadelphia keep the same time as a clock tower in Boston in 1850? No radio signals existed. No electrical grid connected them. No telegraph system transmitted time coordinates. Yet municipal records show these towers stayed synchronized within seconds of each other across hundreds of miles. The official explanation is that clockmakers were just very skilled, that mechanical precision improved, that monthly adjustments kept them aligned. Except the maintenance logs tell a different story. From 1902 through 1910, show corrections from 1902 through 1910, show corrections measured in seconds per month, not minutes. A massive mechanical clock, subject to temperature fluctuations, humidity changes, and physical wear drifting by only seconds. Modern mechanical clocks in controlled environments don't perform that well. This wasn't skill. This was something else maintaining accuracy. I found similar records for towers across 40 cities. Boston's Custom House Tower, completed in 1915, kept time so precisely that ship captains set their chronometers by it from the harbor. The clockkeeper's log notes weather conditions, temperature, and his adjustments. On average, 3 seconds per week. That precision requires either constant astronomical observation or an external reference. He wasn't taking astronomical readings. The logs don't mention it. So what was he referencing? Then there's the architecture itself. These towers weren't just tall. They were designed with specific proportions. The clock faces always positioned at particular heights. The bells cast to exact specifications. The mechanisms housed in rooms with strange acoustic properties. Researchers studying Boston's Custom House found that the clock room amplifies certain frequencies while dampening others. Not random acoustics, deliberate design. The room resonates at a specific pitch when the mechanism runs. Now, look at what sits on top of nearly every clock tower built before 1900. Not weather vanes, not decorative spires, spheres, metal spheres, sometimes copper, sometimes bronze, always conductive, always positioned at the highest point. The official explanation calls them finials, architectural ornaments, but they're not decorative. They're too precisely made, too carefully positioned, too consistent across thousands of towers that supposedly had no coordination. I started mapping these towers, not just their locations, but their relationships to each other. The distances between major clock towers in the Northeast form patterns, not random spacing, geometric patterns, triangulation, towers positioned so that any point between 3 towers falls within a specific range. That's not aesthetic city planning. That's network architecture. Philadelphia City Hall sits at the center of a triangle formed by towers in Baltimore, New York, and Harrisburg. Boston's Custom House anchors another triangle with towers in Providence and Portland. The spacing varies, but the principle repeats across every major city. Someone was building a grid, and then around 1900, everything changed. Not the towers themselves. What happened inside them between 1898 and 1915 Nearly every major clock tower in America was either rebuilt, renovated, or had its mechanism completely replaced. The official reason was modernization, electric motors replacing mechanical works, improved accuracy through new technology. Except the new clocks weren't more accurate. They were less accurate. The maintenance logs prove it. After electrification, the Boston Custom House clock required weekly adjustments of minutes, not seconds. Philadelphia's tower started drifting by 5 to 10 minutes monthly. The same pattern repeated everywhere. The new technology was objectively worse at the one job these towers existed to perform. But the renovations continued anyway. Within 15 years, almost every tower mechanism from the 1800s had been removed and replaced. Where did the old mechanisms go? That's what I couldn't find. These were massive installations, tons of bronze gears, specialized clockworks, mechanisms that had kept perfect time for decades. They should be in museums. They should be documented, but I can only locate 12 original tower clock mechanisms from before 1900 still in existence. 12 out of thousands. The rest vanished during the renovation period. The metal spheres disappeared too. During the same 15-year window, those conductive spheres on top of the towers came down, replaced with standard finials, weather vanes, decorative elements. The spheres were melted, discarded, or simply removed from the historical record. The few that survived ended up in architectural salvage yards, their original purpose forgotten. So, what was actually happening before 1900? What were these towers doing that required such precise synchronization, such specific architecture, such carefully designed acoustic properties and conductive elements at their peaks? I found the answer in a place I wasn't expecting. Not in architectural records or clock tower documentation. In patent filings from the 1890s. Specifically patents for something called atmospheric electricity collectors, devices designed to harvest electrical charge from the air itself. The patents describe tall metal structures with conductive spheres at their peaks, positioned to maximize exposure to atmospheric currents. The diagrams look exactly like the clock towers, not similar, identical, down to the specific heights, the metal compositions, the grounding systems running through the building foundations. Patent number 514,170, filed in 1894 by Nathan Stubblefield, describes a system for collecting ambient electrical charge using elevated conductors connected to resonant chambers. The resonant chambers amplify the collected charge through acoustic reinforcement. His drawings show a tower, a sphere, a clock mechanism used as the resonant element. He never called it a clock tower. He called it an atmospheric energy receiver. The patent was granted, then buried in the archives. Stubblefield died in poverty in 1928, his work forgotten. But he wasn't alone. Between 1889 and 1901, at least 47 patents were filed for atmospheric electricity collection systems. Different inventors, different cities, nearly identical designs. All of them describing towers with spheres, resonant chambers, and precise timing mechanisms. None of them calling their inventions clock towers. And then after 1901, the patents stopped. Not gradually, abruptly, as if someone had closed a door that wouldn't open again. Here's what makes this impossible to dismiss. The timing mechanisms in those pre-1900 towers weren't just keeping time. They were regulating something. The gears connected to systems that had nothing to do with moving clock hands. Diagrams from the Philadelphia City Hall renovation in 1908 show the original mechanism connected to a network of copper cables running through the walls. The cables led to distribution panels in the basement, distribution panels in a clock tower. The renovation crew removed everything, and the new electric clock they installed used a fraction of the original mechanism's size. The rest of the space was sealed off. I requested access to those sealed rooms in 3 different towers: Boston, Philadelphia, Baltimore. All 3 requests were denied. The official reason in each case was structural instability. The rooms are unsafe. They've been unsafe for over a century, apparently, because none of them have been opened for inspection since the original renovations. What's in those rooms that requires permanent closure? Now think about what was happening in America during the exact period these towers were being built. The 1870s through the 1890s. That's when the electrical grid was supposedly being invented. Edison, Tesla, Westinghouse, the current wars, the race to wire cities. We're told this was the birth of electrical infrastructure. But what if it wasn't the birth? What if it was the replacement? The towers were already there. The network was already functioning. The atmospheric collection systems were pulling charge from the air. The resonant chambers were amplifying it. The distribution systems were sending it through buildings. Free energy. No coal. No generators. No monthly billing. Just towers collecting what the atmosphere provided naturally. Then came the patents for centralized generation. Edison's direct current, Tesla's alternating current, systems that required fuel, infrastructure, corporate control, systems that could be metered, billed, monopolized. By 1900, those systems had won, not because they were better, because they were controllable. You can't put a meter on atmospheric electricity. You can't charge someone for what they collect from the air. But you can shut down the towers that were doing it. You can replace their mechanisms. You can seal the rooms where the distribution systems lived. You can remove the conductive spheres and call them architectural improvements. The renovation records are remarkably consistent. Every tower that was modernized between 1898 and 1915 had its mechanism removed completely. Every tower had rooms sealed. Every tower lost its conductive sphere. Every tower kept its clock face, because that's what the public expected to see. The function changed while the appearance remained. The perfect disguise for shutting down an entire infrastructure system. Nobody protests when you upgrade a clock. What's left now are shells. Beautiful, architecturally significant shells housing electric motors that move hands on a clock face. The resonant chambers are silent. The distribution panels are disconnected. The spheres are gone. But the buildings remember. The acoustic properties are still there. The grounding systems are still in the foundations. The sealed rooms are still sealed. The evidence exists in the architecture itself, waiting for someone willing to look past the official story about timekeeping and modernization. The question isn't whether these towers did something beyond keeping time. The question is what happens if someone figures out how to turn them back on. I found one researcher who tried. His name was Dr. Hermann Plauson. Between 1920 and 1922, he filed multiple patents for atmospheric electricity collection systems, not theoretical systems, working systems. Patent US 1540998, filed in 1922, describes an apparatus for obtaining electrical energy from atmospheric electricity. The diagrams show collection antennas, capacitor banks, and distribution networks. The language is precise, technical, demonstrating functional understanding. Plauson built a test facility near Hamburg. Contemporary accounts describe it as operational. Then in 1928, his research station burned. The official cause was listed as electrical malfunction. The irony was not lost on anyone. After the fire, Plauson's work disappeared from mainstream scientific literature. His patents remained filed, but were never developed commercially. The atmospheric electricity research that had been gaining momentum in the 1910s and 1920s simply stopped appearing in journals. The funding dried up. The experiments ended. By 1930, the only acceptable narrative for electrical power involved centralized generation from coal, oil, or hydroelectric dams. Now connect that timeline to the clock towers. The last major wave of tower construction ended around 1915. The patent filings for atmospheric collection peaked between 1918 and 1925. Plauson's facility burned in 1928. By 1930, both the towers and the research had been abandoned, not gradually, simultaneously, as if someone had decided the entire avenue of investigation needed to close. I keep thinking about those sealed rooms in Philadelphia, Boston, Baltimore. What's behind those walls that requires a century of structural instability as justification for permanent closure? Why renovate a tower, remove its mechanism, seal the mechanical rooms, and then declare those specific spaces too dangerous to ever inspect? If the rooms were truly unsafe, they would have been demolished or reinforced. Instead, they were locked and forgotten. That's not safety protocol. That's preservation of evidence that nobody wants examined. There's a detail in the renovation records that nobody discusses. When crews removed the original clock mechanisms, they didn't just throw them away. They documented the weight. The Philadelphia City Hall Tower mechanism, removed in 1899, weighed over 8 tons. The components included copper cylinders, specialized gearing, and what the work order described as electrical apparatus of unknown function. 8 tons of equipment to move 4 clock hands. The electric replacement motor weighed 300 pounds. Where did those 8 tons go? I traced the disposal records. The copper was sold for scrap value. The gearing was listed as salvaged materials. The electrical apparatus of unknown function has no documented disposal. It vanished from the paperwork entirely, as if once removed from the tower, it ceased to exist in any official capacity. This pattern repeats. Baltimore, 1903. Original mechanism removed, documented weight of 6.2 tons, disposal records incomplete. Boston, 1906. Mechanism removed, documented weight of 7.4 tons, copper components salvaged, remaining materials listed as miscellaneous. The electrical apparatus, the distribution panels, the components that connected to the walls, none of it has a final destination in any municipal record I could find. Someone kept those components. Someone knew they were more than clock parts. And someone made sure they disappeared from documentation the moment they left the towers. What I'm suggesting is not that these towers were secretly power plants. What I'm suggesting is that they were part of a distributed collection network. Each tower pulled charge from atmospheric potential. Each tower resonated at frequencies that amplified that collection. Each tower distributed what it gathered through existing copper networks in surrounding buildings. Not enough power to run a city, just enough to supplement, just enough to make coal-fired generation less necessary, just enough to threaten the business model of centralized electrical monopolies. You can't fight an enemy that doesn't exist on paper. You can't protest the shutdown of infrastructure that was never officially acknowledged. You can't demand answers about sealed rooms in towers whose official function was always only timekeeping. The perfect crime requires no crime scene. These towers are still standing. The spheres are missing, but the mounting points remain. The sealed rooms are still sealed, but the walls can be opened. The distribution networks were disconnected, but the conduits are still in the foundations. The evidence exists in the architecture itself. The resonant chambers still have the same acoustic properties they had in 1880. The grounding systems still connect to bedrock. The copper networks still run through the walls of buildings that surround these towers, abandoned now, rerouted to modern electrical systems, but physically intact. What happens if someone maps those networks? What happens if someone measures the resonant frequencies of those chambers? What happens if someone gets inside those sealed rooms and documents what's still there? The towers remember what we were told to forget. Stone and copper don't lie. They just wait for someone willing to ask why a clock needs 8 tons of electrical apparatus. The question was never whether they kept time. The question is what else they kept running. I spent 4 months chasing clock towers. What I found was a coordinated dismantling of infrastructure that nobody admits existed. The towers are still there. The sealed rooms are still sealed. The evidence is waiting in architecture that can't be edited like a document. Someone decided free energy was less valuable than controllable energy. Someone removed 8 tons of equipment and called it modernization. Someone filed 47 patents, and then made sure none of them led anywhere. The atmosphere still carries charge. The towers still stand. And somewhere in those sealed rooms, behind a century of structural instability excuses, the proof is gathering dust.